Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our third of 5 in our series for the SEL Summer Series, brought to you by the Nebraska MTSS team. We believe what will be the most important of the 5 series will be happening today, as our topic is Educator SelfCare. If you have not been a part of these series before, you can find weeks 1 and 2 recordings at LaunchNE.com, and every series after, so weeks 3, 4, and 5 will also be up and on that same website after. You also will be reminded at the end of this webinar that we have 6 more weeks coming to you. Instead of our annual summit, where we bring over 1,200 educators together last year, this year we'll be coming to you virtually, spread out over 6 weeks. So make sure you check out nemtss.unl.edu for more information on that. With that, I'm going to kick off with Kayla and Casey, who will be talking to you today about Educator Self-Care, Week 3 of our Summer SEL series. So take it away, girls.
Thank you, Amy. So a little brief introduction. I am Casey Herner, and I am the Region 3 NEMTSS lead. And I am with Kayla Parr today, and I'll let her introduce herself quickly.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kayla Parr, and I'm also part of the Nebraska MTSS team as an early childhood pyramid model implementation facilitator. So we're going to start today's session off, and I ask that throughout today's session we have a series of questions that we'll pose to you all, and we just ask that you answer or put in your responses within the chat, and we thank you for your participation.
Absolutely. So to begin with a few of our learning objectives, today we will be looking at and understanding why self-care is an essential component as an educator, understanding the impact of adult well-being on children's social emotional development. We will identify types of stress and reactions to that stress, learn strategies for reducing stress and increasing wellness, understand how mindfulness can help reduce stress and improve well-being, practice mindfulness, and then commit to self-care today. So hopefully we'll get through all of those things with you all. So first of all, educator self-care. It's simply an ethical imperative to ensure someone's giving attention to their own physical and psychological health, meaning they need to be taking an active role to preserve their own well-being. They need to take time to ensure physical and psychological health is cared for of themselves. They need to protect their time, and they need to set a few healthy boundaries. They should also be intentionally planning time for themselves and then rationally detaching when they need to. They also need to identify the areas in which they can improve on and then set some goals for that improvement. So with that being said, what we would like you to do first and foremost is in the chat indicate how many days a week do you typically engage in self-care activities. Now keep in mind, self-care activities are something that you're doing specifically for yourself, not for other people. So how many days in any given week do you participate in those type of activities? So if you could just put the number in the chat, that would be great. Getting quite a few mixed ones. So we have 5 to 7, and we also have a 1. Some 2s, some 3s, 4s. Ooh, I like that, jazzercise. 2 and 3, a 1. 2 to 3 times a week. 6 to 7 times a week. All right. So kind of looking at that, just a quick estimate, that was probably an average of us educators that are on here are about 3 times a week, 3 to 4 times a week. It kind of looked like that we were doing self-care activities. So hopefully as we continue on with the presentation, you'll kind of grasp some other reasons why we need to practice more self-care activities. A big component is for the reality of today's educators. So today's educators are faced with a lot of different things, very specifically now when we're looking at returning from an extended break from COVID, the pandemic. So we have a lot of stuff going on. Nearly half of our educators are feeling stressed daily, which is right up there with nurses and doctors. As you see on here, there was close to a 25% increase in the amount of teachers that reported being under great stress over a 27-year span. There was also close to a 25% decrease in teacher job satisfaction, and that was only in a 4-year time span. So think about that a little bit. A 25% decrease in 4 years in teacher job satisfaction. This then leads to the shortage in preparation programs too. There was a 37% decline in that. So all of those are very alarming numbers, which leads to why we need to be doing what we can to help in assisting in alleviating the stress for our educators. There are some other rationale points to consider as well. Some of those points are educators need to be at their fullest capacities, pure and simple. And when they are at those fullest capacities, then they're able to teach at their fullest capacity. So they work with our students a lot better. With that, emotional awareness, empathy, anger, anxiety management, and problem solving are key social emotional learning components. And those can be modeled then for our students, which then ultimately leads to a more positive climate. This self-care might look like stepping back, grounding themselves as teachers in the moment, taking some deep breaths, and that helps demonstrate model for our kids on how they can keep calm when they do not feel as regulated either. So these presences can teach resiliency skills to students, which will build their capacity when they are experiencing difficult moments. So us as adults, it's important to check on how we are feeling. And we have Kayla that's going to do just that for us.
All right, so before we jump into the types of stress, we just want to check in with you all. So we have another fill in the chat activity here. So in this given moment, just on a 1 to 5 scale, how are you currently feeling? So you can go ahead and enter how you're feeling into the chat. Seeing some 2s and 3s, quite a few 3s. And when you look at the 3s on just the emotion chart, that'll help you put it into perspective of kind of where everyone's at in today's session. Which makes sense. We're in the middle of a lot of unknowns, and we're excited. So we're not terrified, but we're excited to move forward and doing our best and trying different strategies. Hence why we're here today. But still, a level of uncertainty causes some of that fear. So it seems as if the majority of us are right in the middle of that, feeling right about a 3. So now we're going to jump into the types of stress. And so what you see here is there's 3 types of stress we're going to talk about today. The eustress, which is a positive form of stress, which is motivating, it's exciting, or it pushes a person to try new things or start a new job, build upon a new project, or generate new ideas. Typically, after a summer break, this is a great position for teachers as they're excited to start the school year. They've done some research on new things they've learned from last year and things they would like to implement moving forward into the new school year. But then we also know as life happens, there's other forms of stress that aren't always positive, and that's that acute distress, where there's those demands of just your daily life living. Typically, this form of stress is short term, but it can surface itself in various ways, such as just having a mental breakdown or just a breakdown. I can say that many of us probably have experienced that over the last few months, where out of nowhere you break down because there's so many things happening and changes taking place, and it's that short term trying to navigate those that type of stress. Other examples would be just running late to a meeting or missing a deadline. Then we dive a little bit deeper, which is that chronic stress, so a little bit more toxic and long-term, and can be extremely overwhelming. Sometimes it's hard for those to see this type of stress in themselves because it's part of their everyday. And so being able to label and recognize these forms of stress will only help you navigate your way out of them, if it ever is right in front of your own face. So as we move on, we have a great video to share with you that just demonstrates just that stress can arrive in any fashion. And so we'd like to just take a couple minutes and play this video for you.
I think it's already starting. Okay, here's your homework. First let me tell you the directions. What's 4 takeaway 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Takeaway. What's 6 takeaway 1? 1. No, you take away 1 out of 6. How much does it equal? What's 10 minus 1? I don't know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Nope. Take away 1. What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Nope. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And 1 more. And add 1 more. How many is equal? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1 equals, it makes 9. See how you take away? You take away 1 and it equals 1. Do you get it now? Yes. Again.
Okay, so one of the greatest snippets I've seen in a while. I'm sure if you are all in the world of education, you've experienced just that, right? As you saw, but when you watched the video, you had to have seen that just as we talked about the 3 different types of stress, that their stress can arrive in many different ways, and it can come to the surface in a small situation or scenario as trying to do some subtraction. So again, it's important for us to realize that there's different ways to deal with the stress that is forward-facing for us. And so what we're going to do next is talk through some first, we'll start with some unhelpful strategies that you may have tried and found that they were no longer successful for you when you were trying to overcome some of your stressors of the days. But some commonly unhelpful strategies you may have heard of before, or that, again, they're often learned behaviors, or that they're automatic and take little effort or intention. And when we think about self-care, you most definitely have to be intentional about your practices. It doesn't always come as our first nature and what we're trying to do, because our focus is typically on supporting children first. And so it definitely does take effort. And so the strategy of it not taking much effort or attention is just not true. Other unhelpful strategies that are out there is that it doesn't necessarily solve the problem, or can be harmful to us or others in our lives, or many others is that it can deplete us further and take more of our energy when we already know we're giving it our all. So on to some stress responses. You've probably heard of fight, flight, or immobilize. And so for flight, typically individuals become angry during this stage or upset, can become frustrated, and just ready to kind of veer off. As we saw that video of the teacher trying to teach that subtraction, you could see he was becoming visibly frustrated. And he most definitely was ready to just say, yep, you got it. Let's move on. And so I think that's a common form of stress responses that we would see in our own selves as educators, as we are constantly looking at different scenarios throughout each and every day of our classroom environments. Secondly is the flight response, which individuals may want to escape or tend to become unfocused, or they withdraw from the situation. And lastly, immobilize. Individuals might not know what to do, or tend to freeze. So just a few examples for you to kind of reflect on is when we look at these different types of stress responses, is as it could have happened to you in the past, or even just moving forward. But if you're walking into your classroom as the students are currently arriving, I mean, that's an example where you're putting yourself to have to respond to a form of stress because you're not quite prepared. You are running a little behind. Or field trips. Field trips were always a trigger, because you have to prepare yourself for the uncertainty outside of your four walls of your classroom. And so we know these examples exist within our everyday. And so again, it's important for us to identify or label our own stress responses and think of strategies to help us through them as they occur, because they will. So this next slide talks about some stress response strategies. So for the fight response, there's opportunities to calm yourself through meditation or relaxation, taking deep breaths. Oftentimes the school day gets so busy for you that finding any minute or moment that you can just decompress, and so you're able to take on that next subject area or the next transition that you have in your day. For example, just playing some calming music while the kids are in specials or at lunch. Sometimes it's nice to go socialize in the teacher's lounge, but other times you might just need some time to yourself within your classroom where you can play some calming music so you're ready again as the afternoon would begin. Other thoughts for opportunities to respond to your stress outside of the school day is through yoga or nature walks. You can have mindfulness opportunities both within your classroom, within the school day, but also once you return home. Just find ways to decompress and reflect on the day, but then also be able to separate and continue through your personal life and personal experiences. And then lastly, for immobilize, some other strategies to consider is more active movement, running, jogging, dancing, anything that's going to get you up, moving, get your mind off of whatever that is that causes stress throughout the day for you. All right, so we covered different types of stress and then also strategies to respond to those forms of stress. So a quick question for you all is what are some other response strategies that you have used or seen others use? And if you could, go ahead and enter those into the chat. I'm sure there's more out there that you've had to learn on your own, so please share. There were some good ones: baking, singing, praying, reading. An idea for the classroom are those brain breaks through Go Noodle. Maybe make your favorite snack. I might use that one too many times. Coloring, bird watching. Watch the grass grow maybe. Good, all great ideas. The list can continue, and if you see one that stands out that works for your personality, grab onto it, because again, you have to be intentional. It sounds so silly, but you have to plan for your own self-care. It doesn't just happen. So like I said, take a look at the chat. If there's one that stands out for you, grab onto it and put it in your toolbox as we always encounter new scenarios every day that we need to overcome or meet side by side. So thank you for sharing. All right, so we again talked about ideas on how to overcome those stressors or how to again just meet your own self-care needs. But this is a great visual that says place the oxygen mask on yourself first before helping small children or others who may need assistance. So this is your typical example for teachers. Is your first response is to help in any situation for students. The students typically do come first. That's what good educators go to and do, but it's also extremely important for us to be mindful and intentional. This is where we have to be intentional of taking a step back and making sure that we are taking care of ourselves as educators so that we are able to take care of our children or our students. Because without your health and without your health, they won't have you. That's what leads to that teacher burnout. That's what leads to you needing to take days off from work. Many teachers call them their mental health days. It's real, it exists. And so if you can put these strategies in place for yourself before it gets to that point, this is just another great reminder to put yourself first, as we know you will always take care of those kids. So a little more guidance. I thought this was a great visual, a little wordy, but if you just take a look right from the top is, okay, we need these flow charts of how do I identify first I need to identify my stressor, and is this something I can control? I think that's our first question we should always ask ourselves, is this within my control? And if it is within our control, what are some coping strategies we can use or I can use to reduce my own stress in that moment? And are there action steps to be taken to address this stressor? What resources are available what resources do I need to implement the action steps that I have put in place? And what can I do to take my mind off this stressor when I'm feeling overwhelmed? If the stressor is something that you can't control, what coping strategies can I use to reduce my stress in this moment? Are there any elements of the stressor that I could possibly control? Because typically there's something within that stress that we could control. But if not, what can I do to take my mind off it if I'm feeling overwhelmed? And again, what are some of those resources to help me through whatever that stress I'm feeling? So many of us are visual thinkers, and so this was just a great tool to help you shape the steps that you need to follow as guidance to overcome those stressful moments. But I think the first question to ask yourself is this within my control? All right, so on to some helpful strategies are connectedness and a sense of belonging, having healthy boundaries. Again, as teachers, we tend to spend every waking moment of trying to problem solve to make the next day so much better, when maybe all you need to do is just take a break and the next day might be better. Lesson learned through my own experience. Other helpful strategies are just your mindfulness, being able to reflect and separate. Also prioritize what's within your control and what are your necessary steps to get through that situation. And then also the biggest one is allowing yourself grace. We are naturally hard on ourselves, and it's not always in the forefront to just give yourself a moment or give yourself some time to figure it out. Typically, we're very responsive as educators, where we want a quick fix, and not all stressors have that quick fix. As we saw in some of those beginning slides, it takes time and it takes effort. So give yourself grace as you work through that process. I have a few questions I want to pose to you when you're thinking about these helpful strategies. You don't need to respond in the chat, just do your own self-reflection. So what ways do you need to take care of yourself in order to better take care of others? I'm going to say that one more time. What ways do you need to take care of yourself in order to better take care of others? Another question for you to think about: how can you support yourself to better support your students? And what would that look like? So with the number one strategy being connectedness and having a sense of belonging, we have a quote here that the ultimate desire of all human beings is to feel as though they belong. So pick me, choose me, and love me. That I feel like it just kind of says it for you. We all want to belong. We all want to feel connected as adults and as children. All human beings have an innate desire to connect with one another and have a sense of belonging. This sense of belonging and connecting is a fundamental human need and leads us to feel a part of something greater than ourselves. The ways to improve on the connectedness or connectedness with others is begin with familiarity and then expand out. So there's little things of just saying thank you, making eye contact with others, starting a conversation each week with someone new. Remember key things about others and bring them up, helping them feel like you remember them or remember what they've shared with you about them. Leave your physical comfort zone in your building from time to time. Eat lunch in different places. Invite others to lunch with you. And attend extracurricular activities when your time allows for it.
All right, and as a precautionary measure, it's after we just talked about all the connectedness, it's also essential that you do not feel as though you need to be connected all the time. Healthy boundaries are actually really, really good. So to kind of explore some of these healthy boundaries, there's physical, there's social, and there's psychological and emotional boundaries to consider. So when we think about physically, make sure you shut off yourself from work and schedule time for yourself during the day based on your schedule. So whether that's during the day at work or not, just make sure you have time for yourself. So at the beginning, we said about 3 to 4 people, they were engaging in self-care activities. This is a self-care activity, is just creating time for self. So try to make sure you are doing that every day at some point of time. And we're encouraging educators, and you encourage your colleagues to do the same. Socially, share what you are comfortable sharing to build those relationships. Be transparent. That's really, really essential. Establish times others can contact you. So let them know when it is appropriate or not appropriate to. Never compromise your values to meet the needs of other people. Some helpful tools here also are to use some I statements and not you statements. So for example, instead of saying, you need to give me more advance notice if you want me to go, you could try saying instead, I am unable to go because I need to spend time with family or work out or whatever that is. Just try to switch it so it's an I instead of a you, and it's a lot less threatening that way. Psychologically and emotionally, know that you are not responsible for everything that happens to every single student. This is really, really important because I think as educators, we tend to want to make sure everybody is doing okay. We want to make sure the students feel as though they're healthy and they're well, and that's the case. We also need to understand, though, that there's a difference between sympathizing and empathizing with kids and carrying their struggles with and for them. So we're not built to carry other people's struggles all the time. With as many kids as we interact with, other human beings we interact with, we need to be able to separate empathy, sympathy, and then carrying on those struggles. So thinking of some of these things, please share in the chat some additional ways that you've either practiced or you've seen the practice happening of how you've established healthy boundaries. So please add that to the chat. How do you establish healthy boundaries to make sure you're the best educator you can be? Yes, so caring for physical health, so the body and the mind are strong and able to care for others. That's fantastic. No devices at the dinner table. Have office hours on Remind app, so I'm not answering questions all day. Absolutely.
Yeah, do it then.
It's just important to have that time to just take a bit of a break for ourselves.
No, so it's gonna be.
Someone suggested I can't say yes to that right now is a good boundary statement too. Yep, the right now or yet. Great. Don't take the phone into a bedroom. So make sure you're having time to relax your mind. Very nice job. All right. Thank you for sharing. Those are all really, really great strategies. Oh, one more. I'm not very good at this. It's something I need to work on. I truly believe this is something we all need to work on. Kayla's already mentioned it. We want to give our all as educators, and we always want to. But for our health and our physical and our social, emotional, and our mental health, taking time and establishing healthy boundaries is a really good thing. So now let's tie into a little bit of, after we discuss the healthy boundaries, we'll tie in a little bit more on what mindfulness is. We had mentioned mindfulness earlier. So what is mindfulness? It is being able to be fully present, aware of where you are and what you are doing. So even thinking during this presentation, it's really tough when there's a screen between us. So please understand that Kayla and I know that. But even during this short amount of time, I'm sure that our minds have drifted somewhere else, or something has happened, or a door was shut out here. So we weren't always fully present. And it's really hard to do sometimes, and that's okay. It's just being mindful is being able to start getting to that point where we're more physically and cognitively engaged in what's actually happening with us. So everyone has this ability. We don't need to worry about conjuring it up. It's already innate and it's within us. Some people, however, might need assistance being able to cultivate it and being able to get it to come out a little bit better. When we are overly reactive or overwhelmed by what is going on around us, it's really, really difficult to have mindful practices. So it's not always easy, very specifically right now in these unprecedented times in education. It's not easy to be mindful because we are really trying to be overwhelmed, and we are reacting to what's happening in the world on a minute by minute basis, sometimes on a daily basis as statistics change, as school plans change. I know many schools have had several different plans, so those are changing, those are morphing, those are shifting. So it's really difficult to not be overwhelmed, but it's something that we can continue to work on and try to practice. With all of this mindfulness, I know there's somewhat of a stigma with what it is. There's a bit of a stigma of how it was all morphed and how it was emerged, but hopefully we can work through that as well. So mindfulness is not obscure or exotic. I think that kind of comes to mind sometimes. It's actually really familiar. And it's familiar because it's something that we already do. It's how we already are. It takes many shapes, and it also goes by many, many different names. It's not a special added thing we do either. We already have the capacity to be present, and it doesn't require us to change who we are. So it's already within us, right? But we can cultivate these innate qualities with some simple practices that are significantly demonstrated to benefit ourselves, our loved ones, our friends, ultimately our students and our colleagues as well. So you don't need to change. You don't have to change who you are. Solutions that ask us to change who we are or become something we're not have failed us over and over and over again. Mindfulness recognizes and cultivates the best of who we are as human beings. Mindfulness has the potential to become a transformative social phenomenon. And here's why. Anyone can do it. Mindfulness practice cultivates universal human qualities and does not require anyone to change their own beliefs, which is fantastic. It's a way of living. So mindfulness is more than just a practice. It brings awareness and it brings caring into everything that we do. Every single thing we do, it brings care, compassion, and awareness. It's evidence-based. We don't have to take mindfulness on faith. Both science and experience demonstrates its positive benefits for our health, our happiness, our work, and our relationships. Also, it sparks motivation. As we deal with our world's increasing complexity and uncertainty, especially now, mindfulness can lead us to effective, resilient, low-cost responses to many of these problems that are occurring. So what does that mean as educators? There are different qualities of mindful educators. So we have compassion, understand boundaries, attention, intention, and authentic. Mindful educators are incredibly compassionate, and we know that. By practicing mindfulness as educators, they can cultivate compassion toward themselves as well as the students. When a student is, so for example, when a student is being resistant, distracted, or even obstinate, they can use mindfulness practice to see the student within the student. So they know there's something else in there, that it's not the student wanting to actually be that way. So instead of looking at his or her external actions, they can ask, what basic needs is the student trying to meet right now? So that's tying into compassion. Mindful educators are also understanding. Mindfulness helps educators see themselves more deeply by watching their thoughts or emotions. And that also assists them in witnessing how easy it is to lay assumptions, judgments, prejudices onto the world around us. Specifically, this will assist educators in exposing their own unconscious bias, and that will help them better meet the needs of all the learners that they interact with. Mindful educators establish boundaries. So as we discussed early, boundaries are good. This also assists our students. It assists educators in taking care of their own selves, and they can better care for others. When thinking in relation to this in a classroom, they assist in creating an environment of trust. So these boundaries can actually create trust rather than setting up walls. So we can't think of boundaries as walls, but we think of it as things that we create for our students so they can be creative, they can thrive. They don't limit students by any means, just as a canvas does not limit an artist. Rather, they establish a space where students feel secure enough to learn, to be creative, and to thrive. Mindful educators do pay attention, so educators need to be able to slow down and pay attention to the needs of the students without so much stress in such an age of information and distraction. So there's a lot of stuff coming at us all the time, constantly. So being able to stop and pay attention to what's actually happening is really, really important. Mindful educators have good intention. So this is really important to know that intentions are not expectations. Expectations keep us from remaining present to the ever and changing needs of our students. So we set an expectation and we think they need to meet it without actually seeing that the student's changing in and of themselves. They can lead to, so these expectations can lead to discouragement and disappointment. However, if we tend to teach with good intentions, it allows educators to be flexible and change to support students and a class as a whole from moment to moment. So for example, if you think about something as simple as canoeing down the river, one might need to focus on where they're going, right? So they need to go, and they would want to go in a particular direction to get it to a particular end point. So they would hold that intention of going to the particular direction. However, the nature of the river might take them in many different directions before they reach the desired spot, right? So in understanding that, we know that this experience of canoeing is just that. It's up to nature. A teacher also needs to be flexible with the current of their classroom too. So our vision is only as good as our ability to adapt to it in a world which is emerging. So our students are all emerging. And finally, mindful educators are authentic. So we just need to continue to learn and grow from other people. When we engage in self-acceptance of authenticity, we do not need to spend time and energy hiding our own vulnerability. So modeling this can be incredibly beneficial for students. When teachers admit their own humanity, the students enter a space that is safe for them to be themselves too. All right, so now that we kind of explored a bit of the qualities of mindful educators, here are some very specific strategies or just thoughts and perspectives that educators can work towards. So some understanding acceptance, understanding letting go, cultivating non-judgmental awareness, and embracing vulnerability. So the first one on acceptance is the need for educators to practice this and understand there will be success and failures in life. Absolutely. We all succeed, we all fail. It needs to be okay that you succeed and that you fail, and let that be okay. Sit with it, but don't just sit with it, also learn from it. So learn from your successes while you're also learning from your failures. When students see this modeled, it'll assist them in building their own resiliency skills. And so how can we do this? So all of this being said, accepting ourselves and being true to who we are, we practice it through a growth mindset. We can practice it by taking healthy risks. We can practice it by understanding and using our own strengths. So modeling using our strengths to be the best versions of ourselves we can be. We need to know our own vision and we need to work towards that vision. We need to learn how to forgive ourselves. So know that, yes, we make mistakes, but forgiving ourselves is really, really important. We also need to understand neuroplasticity. So our neural pathways, and those of our students, those of everybody, they're continually changing based on what we're exposed to. So the environments around us, they also are exchanged based on how we behave and how we see other people behave. So that's why modeling is so incredibly important as educators, is as we model, it changes the neural pathways of our students too. So what they're seeing is a little bit different, and then they can also practice some of those things. So a positive quote that might allow some of us to keep focus on what acceptance is actually from Marilyn Monroe. It's wanting to be someone else is a waste of the person you are. So just understanding and continually learning to accept who we are allows us to become the best versions of ourselves. And it's not wasting a human being by trying to be something that we're simply not. So with this acceptance, we can also work on the concept of letting go. I'm sure everybody's seen Frozen, so that if that doesn't come to your mind, I don't know what will, when Elsa's singing and she's becoming her own person. And she's letting go of a lot of different things, right? She's letting go of the past expectations, the expectations that her family has set up for her, her own fear and expectations that she needs to be this perfect sister, she needs to be this perfect daughter. So kind of just starting to let go of some of that was really, really important. So we need to stop holding on to the things that are making us unhappy. We need to recognize when we are driving to negative thinking and learn how to get our minds back into the present moment. So again, that mindfulness piece of being in the present. This is not to forget about the thoughts altogether, though. So I think that's really important. It's not just forgetting, but rather changing how we think about them. So it's not forgetting them, it's changing how we think about different experiences and thoughts. So we can do this by letting go of story. So what stories can you set free and which ones can you cultivate about yourself? We can do this by letting go of stuff. What things make you tethered in your inner space and what can you live without? We can let go of the busyness. And this is really hard for educators to do sometimes. Do you know what really matters? How do you simplify to focus on those things? So in thinking of this another way, there's another quote that can help guide us to this point, which is by an unknown author. So one of the happiest moments in life is when you find the courage to let go of what you can't change. So I think it's just important as educators, as people, as human beings, to know there's simply things in our lives we can't change. And we need to figure out how we react to those things we can't change. That's in our control, but we can't simply change some things. And I think that's okay to say, that we can sit there and acknowledge, know, and understand and be okay with that. So by allowing ourselves to let this go of what we can't change, we can work toward the goal of cultivating a non-judgmental awareness as well. So this is really critical. And when we talk about conscious bias, when we talk about unconscious bias, a lot of that is towards other people and it's projected towards other people. Cultivating a non-judgmental awareness is really a lot of with us and within who we are as human beings. So when we do this, we allow ourselves to sit with our thoughts and have no reactions to them. So try not to be negative to the thoughts we have. We have to try to not fix all of them so we can actually be human beings. We need to be able to sit with our whole selves and try not to judge ourselves during that time. And that's a lot harder to do than what I think people think, is that we just need to be able to be and accept who that is we are and not judge who we are at that time. Because that all opens the doors for then our self-acceptance. So some practices to assist with this could be meditation and reflection. Meditation begins and ends in the body and involves taking the time to pay attention to where we are and what's going on inside of us, to be in tune with what is happening around us. So it's really just being in the moment. When we are reflecting, then we can, and I think teachers tend to do quite a good job at this the self-reflection. But when we're doing this, we notice when thoughts arise, we recognize those thoughts without denouncing or clinging to them, and we move forward with clarity and remain present in moments. Which this kind of led us to another quote. As you can see, I'm very much a quote person. It connects me to a lot of different thoughts and different spaces in time. But think about this for a moment. Kind thoughts are rarer than either kind words or deeds. So kind thoughts are rarer than either kind words or deeds. They imply a great deal of thinking about others. This in itself is rare, but they also imply a great deal of thinking about others without the thoughts being criticism. This is rare still. So this can also be flipped into thinking about one's own thoughts. So how we are thinking about ourselves without those thoughts being criticism is really, really important in cultivating the non-judgmental awareness about ourselves, thinking about more positive things. So how powerful can that be in increasing teacher efficacy then, right? So teacher efficacy is a direct correlation to student achievement, and that's statistically shown that students achieve more with higher teacher efficacy. Well, can a teacher efficacy be tied to how positive they think about themselves? So helping teachers and helping colleagues and helping our students to cultivate that non-judgmental awareness about themselves is just really, really powerful. So with this, we also can go into how do we embrace vulnerability? So our vulnerability acknowledges our humanity. It helps us in understanding emotions within ourselves. It allows us to feel and engage with various emotions, which will assist in perceiving emotions of others. So us exposing and digging into our vulnerability actually helps us with others in communicating. We can practice this by doing some things educators do have a difficult time doing, like admitting what we do not know all the time, asking for help, sharing our struggles and accomplishments. So I don't think it's because educators don't want to be able to. I think they feel as though sometimes they just have to know it all and they need to be the expert all the time. So there also are some things that educators actually do quite well, but there's always room for improvement and encouragement for educators to do is expressing appreciation, acknowledging the need to apologize, and accepting that we will make mistakes and we'll learn from them. And then, of course, this kind of ties back to Brene Brown. On the next one is that daring greatly means the courage to be vulnerable. It means to show up and be seen, to ask for what you need, to talk about how you're feeling, to have those hard conversations. This just truly encompasses the multifaceted approach to vulnerability. In this one statement itself by Brene Brown, it leads us to more mindful practices, of course, and that then leads us to better self-care as educators. So this is simply essential for educators to just start digging into and understanding all the time, but especially as we begin thinking about going back to school, as we begin the process of what's that going to look like, feel like, look like. It's just a great way to keep in mind. So with that, there are a few other things that Kayla's going to share to help with self-care.
All right. So as Casey just alluded to, our couple weeks ahead of us and school starting and the planning and preparing for students to come in person or remotely, it's important for us as educators to be able to prioritize, because we can go and go and go. And again, if you're thinking about your own self-care, that's not what's best for you. So it's important to, yes, have your list of, to put yourself in a place of preparedness, but you also want to make sure you can prioritize as to what needs to be done in this given day or within this week, month, or semester or year. Being able to categorize your to-do list in a prioritized manner will help you overcome what it is that you want to accomplish in a reasonable manner, rather than just trying to quick get it done by the time the students arrive. So prioritize, allow yourself some time to stop. Like I said, as educators, we tend to go and go and go. And so do allow yourself time to stop. Stop each day. You can use some of those stress strategies that we shared earlier of coloring, or just relaxing your brain, getting your mind off of your to-do list of what needs to be done, be able to separate. And lastly, give yourself grace. It's easy to put yourself in a position where you want, we as educators, when Casey shared those characteristics of educators, giving ourselves grace doesn't come naturally. As teachers, you are the one who holds that umbrella every day, day in and day out, protecting your students from everything that could possibly harm them. You are their shield. The problem is there comes a time when your arms get tired and your hands begin to shake. Continuing to hold the umbrella is almost impossible and can send you over the edge physically and mentally. So pass your umbrella when you need to. Also, reach out to others. This doesn't always come naturally to many, but it is good to reach out, share your experiences, share your thoughts. This is normal. It's normal to talk with others and ask for help. It doesn't mean you're not good at what you do. So give yourself grace, and with that, continue opportunities for your own professional, or continue opportunities for personal and professional growth. Make commitments to yourself. You can do this by identifying strategies, as we talked about today, that appeal to you and that just feel you can do within your own means. Write them down and keep them accessible. Sometimes I'll reflect on things, but then it's like in and out. You have to write them down and have sticky notes on your computer to remind you. Someone talked about an app, the Remind app, of what their work hours are, so we can set time for our own selves. So again, make a commitment to yourself that you're going to take care of yourself, and you're going to take time to reflect. That continued personal reflection through journaling. You can do this by setting goals for yourself. You can work in team building activities if you are more of a collaborator and like to talk through your day with others. You can do that through a team building activity, or if you just need time to yourself, journaling is another great example of making time for your own professional growth. So that's what we have for you today at our Educator Self-Care, but I do want to remind you that our 2020 MTSS Summit has moved to a virtual platform. We're excited to announce that there's a 6-week series starting on August 13th. The link is on the slide here that will take you to the Nebraska MTSS website, where you are free to register for all sessions. Typically, each given week, there are 2 to 3 sessions that occur at the same time. So you can register for the one that you're most interested in, but they will be recorded for you to view at a later time. And those sessions will continue through the week of September 17th. So again, great presenters with a strong emphasis on social emotional learning for teachers and for children. with many other topics. So check out the website. And on this last slide is our contact information. You see our statewide support team, as well as the regional support that's closest to you. So with that being said, we thank you for joining and listening. We're going to finish right on time. If there's any questions, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca.